else that you're going to have to give up in order to go up. Okay, so this week's is the law of timing. So we're on chapter 19, the law of timing. When to lead is as important as what to do and where to go. Okay, in this law, you know, when the stakes are high, the consequences of the law of timing are very dramatic and immediate. So reading a situation and knowing what to do are not enough. You need to make, in order to succeed in leadership. Okay, so if you want your organization, department, or team, or you know, if you're in charge of something, you must pay attention to timing. Only the right action at the right time will bring success. Anything else exacts at a high price. Okay, so a high price. And so as we talk about timing, I like to relate this one to sparring because I love sparring. Okay, and that's one of my favorite things to do. And this is very relatable from the standpoint of when he's saying when to do something is as important as to what to do. Okay, and everybody knows that in sparring, if I throw the wrong technique, even if it's a sloppy technique, but I happen to have it at the right time, I might be able to score. I might be able to make it count. Okay, does that make sense for everybody? So even though it might not be the perfect technique, if my timing is good, I will be able to make something happen. All right, it might not be the best desired outcome, but it will give me a result. Okay, and so that is the law of timing in there. Now, what if I was to do the right technique? I had a perfectly skilled technique, and I just couldn't get the time right to make sure that either one, I had an opening, or they were close enough, or there was something where they were moving right in the right direction. If that timing wasn't right, would I be able to score and succeed?
No, sir, and I think this is a law I probably struggle with because I have a hard time managing my time.
Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that because that is kind of a little bit different. Managing time and doing something at the right time is a little different, okay? And so we're going to talk a little bit about time management in kind of a different chapter, but we can talk a little bit more about your statement there coming up. So good, thanks for sharing. All right, so in the book, he talks about this Hurricane Katrina and the law of timing, okay? And he talks about the leadership and how it was a really bad example of the law of timing, okay? So he talked about this city, and for some of you guys, most of you guys, you probably don't remember this. Some of you guys weren't even born, okay? Or you were just being born. Okay? In New Orleans, New Orleans is a city down in Louisiana, and it's basically surrounded by water. And on an average day, the city actually sits about 6 feet below sea level. Okay, so it's already low. It's already down there. So how do they keep water out? Well, they have pumps and they have all kinds of systems in place to kind of keep the city from flooding all the time. But for decades, the state has been worried about potential flooding in the city because of the storm. Well, and on a Wednesday, August 24th, 2005, nobody in New Orleans could have known that the newly formed tropical storm named Katrina would be a big one. The hurricane hit the city, and it was the one that they feared would one day come. All right, and so before the hurricane actually made fall, you know, they have the weather reports. They can see this formation of this big storm, and it starts to head towards New Orleans. Okay, a lot of the cities surrounding New Orleans, including a lot of the parishes around New Orleans, evacuated the cities immediately. They made mandatory evacuations. They said, everybody got to get out, okay, because we see this storm coming. However, the mayor of New Orleans, Mayor Ray Nagin, I think it was Nagin, or Nagin, Ray Nagin, he was the leader of the city at the time, and he didn't order that evacuation. In fact, he kind of dragged his feet. He was indecisive. And later on, he kind of got a lot of pressure from everybody else. But his motives were, he was thinking that by making everybody evacuate, there would be a big financial stress or burden on the city. And it could cost lots of jobs. It could cost a lot of people to lose jobs and whatnot. So he was really worried about that. But what he should have been worried about, what he should have been thinking about, is really how not evacuating could cost a lot of people their lives. And so he was really more worried about the wrong thing. So later that night, after pretty much everybody else had ordered mandatory evacuations, he just basically came on and said nonchalantly about, if you want to leave, he's voluntary evacuation, basically what happened. So not a lot of people left because his leadership and his timing was saying, oh, we're okay. The results of his leadership, though, really played out in the national coverage in its aftermath. So water was flowing into the city, and you can see in this picture here that, did I share my screen? I probably didn't share. Yep, I have it. Okay. So you can see here, the city's just flooded. Okay? There's water everywhere. And people had to climb on their roofs, and they had to go to the Superdome and everything else. But really, because he didn't order that mandatory evacuation until that next day, it was too late for a lot of people. They got stranded, and they didn't know what to do. And so that became a terrible tragedy. About 1,800 people died. And now, let me ask you, though, if the leaders had paid greater attention to not only what they did, but also when they did it, do you think that as many people would have died?
No, I think if he would have evacuated them sooner, then nobody would have died.
Yeah, and you don't know about nobody, but he certainly could have made the situation better with the law of timing if he would have acted swiftly. We're going to talk about some of the key components in the in the leadership law of timing, but the big thing here is that he didn't act. Not only was it kind of his responsibility to make this leadership decision, but also the federal government kind of really botched it here because they also drugged their feet. They weren't decisive, and they took days and days and days before they actually acted and sent federal help to the citizens there. And so that also played into it. So there was really two big failures in the law of timing by not only the local mayor, but also the federal government. Okay, so he really brings this point up because it shows how important the law of timing really can be. All right, so every time a leader makes a move, there are really four outcomes. So the first outcome would be if the leader makes the wrong action at the wrong time, it leads to disaster. Okay, and we related that to sparring. So if I do the wrong punch at the wrong time, it's just the worst case scenario. Okay, right? Now, the other thing is if you do the right action at the wrong time. So even if I have that perfect technique and I try to bring that wrong or the right technique at the wrong time, well, I'm still not going to score. Okay, I'm still not going to be successful. The other option is that the wrong action can happen at the right time. It could basically be a mistake, or could actually fumble through and actually get lucky and score. Okay, so if I have the wrong technique or anything else, but I have the right time, it most likely is just going to be a mistake. Okay, and then ultimately the right action at the right time, that leads to success. So good leadership timing requires many things. So let's go through that. These are the things that good leadership timing requires. Number one is understanding. The leaders must have a firm grasp on what the situation is really going on. Okay, so do you think the mayor really had a good grasp of the situation? Do you think he might have thought of all the different scenarios and what might happen if the levees break and what might happen if they get stranded, all the citizens get stranded in a flooded city that they can't escape? Like what kind of ramifications might be? He probably didn't have a really good understanding of that. Okay?
He just thought of one scenario. If he doesn't evacuate them, if he evacuates them, they'll lose their jobs. Which is
that's correct. Good, Carter. Okay. So having a strong understanding. So what can you do as a leader to strengthen your understanding? Okay. And so as it relates to martial arts, like if you're leading in class or you're trying to help other people, you need to understand some things. What are some things that you could do or to grow in your understanding. Yes, Miss Addison.
If you're like, let's say a junior, you need to know your techniques, so you need to practice.
Okay, so good. You have to know the curriculum. I can't help somebody else if I don't know the curriculum myself, right? Okay, you can help them on different levels. You can maybe make them feel more confident. I can maybe do some other things to help them, but I really have to have a good grasp and understanding. Okay, this really plays into our leadership, and we teach this every day. We have a saying. We say, "Once taught, twice learned." What does that mean? Who can tell me? Well, I'm going to pick on Mr. Everett. Can you give me an indie? Tell me, explain to me what that means. Unmute that. When I say once taught, twice learned, what does that mean?
I'm not sure, sir.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, if I was to, Everett, you can keep it unmuted. If you were to teach me how, say I was a white belt, do you think you could teach me how to do a proper back fist?
Yes, sir.
With good technique?
Yes, sir.
And you could explain a lot about that back fist?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, say you teach me that back fist, and you continue teaching, and you teach maybe 10 other people. Do you think by the 10th time you teach it that you're really going to know that back fist?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's really what we're saying is every time you teach somebody something, you learn it twice as good. Okay. And that's why we really encourage you to help out in classes. Okay. In order to be a master instructor, it's not that I've done back fists more than everybody else. Okay. It's not that I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of back fists. That doesn't make me a master instructor. What makes me a master instructor is that I've taught that back fist in different ways to different people that struggled with it, that maybe learned it fast. Other people might not have learned it. Maybe some people, I've taught it to blind people. I've taught it to deaf people. I've taught it in a lot of different ways. So that over and over repetition of me teaching creates that level of, we call it internalization, okay? If I really truly know something, that means I understand it through and through, okay? And that's part of this understanding. So leaders must have a firm grasp of the situation. So we said, well, how can you build that? One, you can learn. You obviously have to go to class. You got to study. You got to practice. All of those things are going to help your understanding. But then as a leader, you must teach it. You must give that knowledge, impart it to somebody else, okay? That proves that you really understand it, okay? Now, if you're trying to lead somebody else, you also have to understand something else. What else do you have to understand? Not only do you have to know the curriculum, but you have to understand something else. What else? Say you're teaching me, Mr. Fudge, what are some things that you must understand in order to effectively lead me?
The learning style of the person you're teaching it to.
Very good. Okay, so we teach you that in your junior instructor training. We say you got to be able to identify that Mr. Carter is a very visual learner and a very auditory learner, or Mr. Everett is very kinesthetic. He's got to feel things, okay? And so you have to be able to understand that person. What else do you need to understand? You got to understand what motivates people, right? You got to know what motivates your team, what motivates the other people around you, okay? And understanding that is going to help you have a firm grasp on the situation, okay? So let's go on. So the next thing you have to understand, or good leadership timing requires, is maturity. If leaders' motives aren't right, their timing will be off, okay? And so you have to have that motive in the right place, okay? And so if you're moving in the right direction in your maturity, and that just comes with experience, right? So that kind of goes hand in hand with the next one down there. Okay, the next one is confidence. This one's very important, okay? Especially when you think about sparring, right? When you're sparring and you're trying to time that technique to be right, if you don't have confidence, what happens?
It will miss.
It will miss, okay? Or you might not take the shot, or you might hesitate, or you might telegraph. You have to be confident when the time is right, you go. Okay, and that goes on with the next one. So people follow leaders who know what must be done. They are confident that I'm going to make this decision. All right. So, and the next one is decisiveness. What does that mean? Wishy-washy. Who's ever heard that term? Somebody's wishy-washy. Yes, sir. Mr. Rice, tell us what wishy-washy is.
someone who's not comfortable making a decision, or they go between different decisions. They can't make up their mind.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So yeah, somebody who just can't make up their mind. Okay. Who's ever known somebody who's wishy-washy? They might say something and then right away, maybe like 5 minutes later, be like, you know what? Let's do this. And then they change it again and they go, oh wait, I got to do this. Okay. That messes up the timing, right? Because if you're not decisive, you're not going to make the right move at the right time. You got to be able to commit, and that's that level of commitment. So wishy-washy leaders create wishy-washy followers, okay? Now, we all know that if you are a strong leader and you're decisive, you might make the wrong decisions, okay? But if you make the wrong decisions with confidence and you're decisive and you can make corrections and admit to those, then guess what? People will still follow you because you're not wishy-washy, okay? They know that, hey, you're going in some direction and you're going there strong and boldly, but you might make a mistake, and that's okay. You can make course corrections, right? Okay. The next one is experience. If leaders don't possess experience, they need to gain wisdom from others who possess it. So if you've never done something, Mr. Fudge, if you've never, say, if I said, okay, I want you to get up and teach a seminar on how to get out of a chokehold. Okay, and you had to teach a whole group of people on how to get out of a chokehold, okay? Say you don't have that experience. You've never done that before, right? I bet you haven't taught a seminar on how to get out of a chokehold. So what could you do?
I could get help from some other instructors, learn it as soon as I could, practice it more, and just gain that experience before the time comes to teach it.
Good. So the wisdom part, he said two things that were important is learn it, but then also gain experience by practicing. Okay, so that's that practice. Okay, and the next one's intuition. It's a big word. What does intuition means? It's kind of like a sixth sense where you have this, you're able to kind of predict things, okay? Good sparrers have really good intuition. Okay, what that means is they can almost predict what the other person's going to do. Okay, and as we keep relating the law of timing to sparring, because it has a lot. Timing is one of the most important things for successful sparrers. Okay, you have to have that good timing. Okay, now intuition depends on intangibles such as momentum and morale, being happy, stuff like that. So those are some of the things that play into intuition. Okay, and then as we move along here, we're almost done here. Preparation. Okay, who's ever heard of the 5 Ps? We have Miss Katie on from Middleburg. So Miss Katie, hello, thanks for joining us. So what are the 5 Ps?
I don't know them exactly, but it's making sure that you have everything in preparedness to do what you have to do ahead of time. So making sure everything's in line before, like you said, teaching that seminar or things that you need to do, especially in class.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. That was a great explanation. Okay. So everybody write the 5 Ps down. I want you to write these down because this is important. Everybody say proper planning prevents poor performance. Okay. And it's a kind of a tongue twister to say it fast. So I'll say it again. Proper planning prevents poor performance, okay? And you've probably heard a lot of leaders say that this is a very popular thing to say because planning has a lot to do with being successful, okay? If I plan it out, what's gonna happen, okay? And we certainly made a case for the mayor who botched the whole thing in the Hurricane Katrina catastrophe because he just didn't prepare for it. Okay, the city wasn't prepared on a lot of levels, but as the mayor, he didn't prepare everybody for evacuating and getting things in place, requesting help from the National Guard, doing all these things early on, which would have saved a lot of lives. Okay, and so that's that law of timing and how all of these things are really required. All right, so we're finishing up here. We got about 5 more minutes here. So I want us to think and talk a little bit more about these questions, okay? And the law of timing. So what happens if you have the right idea, but you try to implement it at the wrong time, okay? So you have this great idea and you try to implement it at the wrong time. Have you ever experienced this before? How have you experienced it there, Ian? I saw you raise your hand there.
I forgot, sir.
That's okay. All right. So anybody want to share when they might have? Yes, Mr. Bryce, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I've had this at work. Being an engineer, you have a lot of ideas, and you get excited about an idea, and you go and tell everybody, and they look at you funny, like that doesn't make sense at all. But then maybe a couple of years later, the situation has changed, and then all of a sudden, oh, remember that thing I talked about, 2 years ago? Well, now it would fit. Now we actually had the opportunity to make sense. So that does happen a lot in the real world. You know, you don't want to forget your ideas. Write them down. Make sure you capture them because they could come up at a different time.
Yeah, that's a great example. So, especially in your career, that in your field of work, that I'm sure happens probably more than others. So, anybody else have an example they'd like to share if they had a good idea? Okay, Miss Addison.
One of the worst things I've done during instructing was had a great idea for a drill, but I taught it to the wrong belt rank and they were not focused at all. And it did not work well. But if I had tried it, let's say, like a group of red belts, it probably would have worked a lot better.
That's a good example. So you taught the wrong, you had the right idea, but you taught it at the wrong time. So to the wrong group. Okay, so that's good. All right. So now, I'll talk about my sister here because sometimes people think they're just at the right time at the right place, right? You probably heard that. You just happen to always be at the right time at the right place at the right time. And that's what I meant to say. You're right place at the right time, okay? And, sometimes that just happens, but most of the time it really is the law of timing because of all of these other things that we were talking about, understanding the situation, having confidence, being decisive, having experience, having that intuition, like, hey, something's going to happen. Well, tell you, my sister, my whole family actually are in the business of health and fitness and such. And my sister actually owns a CrossFit gym. She owned a CrossFit gym. And she had this intuition that, back in February of this year, it was time to get out. And she had a very, very successful CrossFit gym. And she had great leadership. And she just thought, hey, this is the perfect time to make some big moves and to get out. And she actually sold the business about 2 weeks before COVID happened. Okay, and if you guys know anything about like business like that, she took a pretty significant. She would have taken a very significant hit, and the new owners basically had the wrong timing. Right? They came in on this thing and had to shut the doors. Okay, so you can imagine how both the law of timing worked on both sides. Right? So is these guys really kind of had the right idea, just the wrong time, and she had the right idea at the right time and executed it, and that probably saved her from having to close the gym. The gym's still very struggling. So that's just a personal example that I have in that. Now, one of the things I would like to brag about our team here at Ripple Effect is we have exercised the law of timing in a pretty important way. And I know Middleburg Martial Arts also is right when COVID happened that weekend, we jumped decisively. We made some decisions to quickly go online, create online classes immediately within 1 weekend. So we were able to transition quickly. Same with, I know Middleburg also did the same thing where they went into transition. And it was because of the law of timing and all of these great leadership requirements and in our team to be able to move quickly and make the right decisions at the right time to make sure that we are able to continue training and keeping everybody training. Okay, and we continue to still have to do that. Okay, we have to make changes to on a daily and weekly basis, something that we've never really had to do in the past. Okay, and that's keeping us moving very positively in the right direction. Okay, so that's just my personal example. But let's talk a little bit about so some of these other questions. What happens if you know it's time to do something, but you choose the wrong thing to do? Okay, so you might not, you got to do something. Like, I feel like it's time to do something. It's time to move, and I gotta do something. You make a decision, but you pick the wrong thing to do. What's going to happen? Well, you're just not going to succeed, right? Okay, and so
No.
picking the right thing is part of that understanding. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to give you your homework assignment. This is going to be a fun one. I'm giving you permission to watch an action movie, okay? But of course, your parents have to agree with it, okay? So think about your favorite action character. Maybe it's mine is Captain America. I like Captain America, okay? So Captain America. And think about maybe some of the movies that they're in, okay? And think about how actually in movies, a lot of timing comes into play for the hero all the time, okay? It's so important for the movies to plot out that way, okay? So take notes next time you're watching that movie of how the law of timing played in the role of in success or failure for the hero or heroine. So if it's whoever, like what did they do? Was it the right thing at the right time? Or did they make the wrong decision or do the wrong thing at the right time? And think about that, okay, and how they were successful. And what you'll notice is as the movie goes on, a lot of times they go through all four of these things, okay? They make the wrong action at the wrong time, and that creates a disaster. And then the right action at the wrong time, and that brings resistance, okay? And then the wrong action at the right time, and they make a mistake. And then ultimately they succeed by making the right action at the right time, and that's your success. So that'll be kind of a fun homework assignment where you guys can think about that next time you're watching an action movie, or maybe this weekend you can throw up an action movie. Okay, so on that note, we are officially out of time. Anybody have any comments or things that they'd like to say or share?
No, sir. Bye.
All right, bye, Carter.
Thank you, Master
Okay.
Mason. It's always awesome to have you guys share.
And I'm looking forward to us getting more of you guys' crew to share too. So, and I was going to tell you guys, we are going to start a new book, and I'll post the details in Daily Mat Chat, but it's called Burnout, Burnout, Burnout. And it talks a lot about what happens when we get exhausted and we get tired. And right now I feel like, everybody's kind of sick of a lot of things, right? We've got maybe an attitude of like, man, I really wish things would just go back to normal. Or maybe it's just, I'm working so hard right now, or I have to work twice as hard. Or maybe I'm kind of sick of school or being online and stuff like that. So it's going to help us change our mindset and how we can avoid becoming burnt out. Okay, and so we're going to be starting that. We are in chapter 19. We still got 20 and 21. One other important announcement before I get off is next Wednesday, we will not be having Daily Mat Chat. So this will be skipped. We're going to be canceling next Wednesday because Thanksgiving obviously is the next day, and I want to make sure everybody gets time to spend with your families. But on Thanksgiving morning, you can join me for kickboxing at 5:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Okay, so if you guys want to join me at kickboxing 5:30 to 7, it's an hour and a half. We're going to have a great workout. So we will simulcast it. So even Miss Katie, you can jump in online. Okay. So have an awesome rest of your evening. Thanks for joining us.